Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online news summary for Saturday, May 17th. Off the top, we'll examine Alberta's ongoing privacy and information access struggles, where recent court decisions and watchdog findings are putting the provincial government under increased scrutiny. We have a cluster of stories in BC spanning privacy and access to information, with a complicated situation around a potential whistleblower. We'll scan Canada for key stories affecting privacy, from ransomware attacks in Nova Scotia to AI ethics in journalism. And finally, in the United States, privacy and civil liberties face mounting challenges under Trump administration policies, making it increasingly important to carry your papers. The strange days continue. Let's dive in. Albertans are discovering the serious impacts to privacy and access from the government's recent legislative changes. Alberta's Information and Privacy Commissioner has found the provincial government non-compliant with Freedom of Information laws, highlighting significant delays in processing access requests. A report from Information and Privacy Commissioner Diane McLeod says Alberta's government has implemented internal procedures and policies that allow government employees to wrongfully deny Freedom of Information requests. The report says the information requests she reviewed were denied for not providing enough detail, which McLeod determined is not a valid reason under FOI laws. This investigation by the OIPC reveals systemic failures, causing transparency advocates to call for urgent reform to ensure accountability and public trust. Meanwhile, Alberta's personal information protection law has been partly struck down as unconstitutional. An Alberta judge is upholding an order stopping Clearview AI from operating in the country. The company filed for a judicial review of the order, as well as a ruling on the constitutionality of Alberta's personal information protection legislation. A judge has decided to uphold the order, but ruled that parts of the province's legislation are unconstitutional. This indicates that the legislation does not properly address privacy concerns posed by the internet, and its restrictions for requiring consent are too broad. As background, we've linked in the show notes to our commentary and event with Commissioner McLeod that was held soon after the new laws were brought into effect. There's a lot to unpack in this, and we will be bringing you some additional FIPA analysis in the weeks ahead. Next, we see a group of stories in BC that touch on every aspect of access, privacy, and whistleblower protection. In Vancouver, short-term rental data is at the heart of an ongoing Freedom of Information dispute. The city's refusal to release detailed records has sparked concern among transparency advocates, highlighting potential gaps in public accountability around housing policies. In 2019, Rohana Razel filed 2 requests with the city under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. He was seeking records about Airbnb and other short-term rental operators in Vancouver, including names, addresses, and business license numbers. This is a very clear-cut situation in FIPA's view. We support the work Razel has taken. The release of business data is essential to a functioning democracy. For the City of Vancouver and the province to create and enable a 2-tier business structure where some businesses are subject to public reporting and transparency, while others are enabled to operate in the shadows fundamentally erodes public trust. The issue is not the release of business information, but a disruptive business model coming to grips with inherently flawed practices. Moving to another matter where state surveillance and personal information led to discrimination and improper decisions. An Afro-Indigenous mother won a major court case against a BC agency that unjustly seized her children. The province's highest court ruled the agency acted in a discriminatory manner and that this was inappropriate. The mother is an intergenerational survivor of residential schools in the child welfare system. In 2016, social workers with Vancouver Aboriginal Child and Family Services Society seized children. In 2019, after a lengthy legal battle, the children were returned to the mother's care. In a separate development, the BC government is caught between a rock and a hard place. The complex story involves the opposition critic releasing leaked documents pertaining to criminal matters in the House. The criminal matters discussed triggered special investigations interviews into a potential breach of a police officer's responsibilities. Premier Eby indicates that BC's Director of Police Services acted independently and the government couldn't interfere with a request for an investigation into the leaked document that alleged some pharmacies were diverting prescription opioids to the illegal market. Although absent in the story, FIPA hopes all parties involved consider BC has specific legislation that pertains to whistleblowers and public interest disclosure very specifically. Shifting to other stories across Canada. Nova Scotia Power has confirmed a significant data breach on their electric utility involving sensitive customer data, including bank account details likely stemming from a ransomware attack. The utility says it has started notifying customers about the details of the data breach, and security experts are calling for stronger cybersecurity measures to protect such critical infrastructure and information. Given the breadth and seriousness of the breach, the utility says customers should watch out for unsolicited communications appearing to be from Nova Scotia Power asking for personal information. Meanwhile, Ottawa is looking to offload costly mobile hospitals purchased during the early pandemic response, raising questions about transparency and fiscal responsibility. Documents obtained through the Access to Information Act reveal that offloading the massive, technically complex structures has turned out to be a difficult and slow-moving task. While costs forecasts for the field hospitals for 2025 to 26 were redacted from the documents, the federal government has said it expects to spend 12 to 18 months and $8.4 million in maintenance fees to turn the facilities over to new owners. Next, from Randy Barba, LGI reporter at Bullet Point News, Stouffville. Mayor Lovett of Stouffville, Ontario, is urging the province to prioritize growing towns in the 2025 budget. Lovett's remarks were originally prepared for a pre-budget consultation meeting in January, which was ultimately canceled. In the remarks, he argues transparent budget decisions are crucial for addressing rapidly expanding populations and their infrastructure needs, such as cybersecurity. The mayor is joining a growing group of people and agencies calling for the Ontario Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act to be modernized. The conversation brings us two special reports intersecting AI and Indigenous rights. In the first, Canadian journalists face growing ethical questions around using artificial intelligence. Experts warn that AI's convenience must not override core journalistic principles, calling for clear guidelines to protect privacy and ensure accuracy. There are a growing number of examples of abuse of AI in the media. For example, Sports Illustrated being caught creating fake bylines for AI-generated stories on their websites. Getting the ethics of AI right is important, as online information faces a growing trust problem that requires intent and transparency to reverse and address. Also, from the conversation, recommendations for regulating neurotechnology in Canada emphasize protecting Indigenous rights. With privacy risks high, regulators seek to establish frameworks that respect cultural considerations and safeguard individual autonomy. In April, Indigenous and non-Indigenous members of the original UNESCO expert group published considerations to further safeguard against the risk of neurotechnology becoming an instrument of colonialism. And to wrap up the Canadian segment, we have Joanne Jordan, LGI reporter at Guysborough Journal, bringing us a great reminder. While seniors continue to be specifically targeted for cybercrime, they often require specific and specialized education to prevent becoming victims. Enhanced privacy awareness and practical safeguards remain critical for senior safety. That said, we continue to stress that cybercriminals, fraudsters, and scammers can go after anyone. No one is immune. In the United States, as Trump's immigration crackdown intensifies, ICE authorities detained over 100 individuals during roadside stops in Tennessee, raising alarms over increased privacy intrusions and civil rights concerns. The Highway Patrol said Friday that it made 588 stops in the joint operation with ICE, which took custody of 103 under investigation for immigration violations. It also resulted in 1,120 immigration arrests. Simultaneously, Illinois became the first state to block federal access to personal data on individuals with autism, a direct response to escalating federal surveillance. It came 2 days after U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced a plan to use data maintained by the National Institutes of Health and claims submitted for Medicare and Medicaid coverage to determine the causes of autism. Further controversy arises as an ex-FBI agent sues after secretly recorded criticism of Trump leads to retaliation, spotlighting risks to whistleblower protections and free speech under the current administration. Jamie Menina says in his lawsuit that he was misled by a woman he met on a dating website who held herself out as a politically liberal nurse, but who was working with the conservative activist James O'Keefe. Menina was swiftly fired from Booz Allen, where he worked as a contractor, after O'Keefe contacted the press office and presented at least parts of the video of the 2 dates. Meanwhile, U.S. initiatives promoting democracy abroad are reportedly weakening, prompting concerns about diminished transparency and global influence on privacy and human rights. The new administration has decimated the Agency for Global Media, restructured the State Department to eliminate a global democracy office, and gutting the U.S. Agency for International Development, which just last year launched an initiative to try to halt democratic backsliding across the globe. Internationally, the social media platform X is restricting access to the jailed Istanbul mayor's account under court orders, but actively challenging the decision. The platform's stance highlights ongoing tensions between local laws and global expectations for free expression online. It said X complied to avoid severe punishments, such as the throttling of the whole platform in Turkey. The statement said X maintains that keeping the platform accessible in Turkey is vital to supporting freedom of expression and access to information. And a European court ruled in favor of the New York Times regarding access to text between EU Commissioner-Chief Ursula von der Leyen and a pharmaceutical executive. The statement said the Commission had failed to explain, quote, in a plausible manner, end quote, why the messages did not contain important information. It also said the Commission has not sufficiently clarified whether the requested text messages were deleted, and if so, whether the deletion was done deliberately or automatically, or whether the president's mobile phone had been replaced in the meantime. This decision strengthens press freedoms and transparency, setting an important precedent for public accountability. As always, we hope today's stories help you stay informed about the latest issues surrounding privacy, information management, and public transparency. To help us keep the mics on, please subscribe through FIPA News Monitoring or consider a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music in today's show was composed by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining. A big FIPA thank you to all the contributors, reporters, and outlets that make this podcast possible. And you, our listeners, who help make this successful. Stay safe and stay informed.